The old wooden box fell from the top shelf and crashed onto the kitchen floor just as I was reaching for a bag of coffee. The lid snapped open, and dozens of yellowed photographs scattered across the tiles. I bent down to pick them up, but one picture froze me in place. It showed my wife, Maris, standing beside a little girl with curly brown hair. On the back of the photo, written in faded blue ink, were 5 words that changed my life forever. Our daughter, age 5, forgive me. My hands began to shake. My wife and I had been married for 20 years, and I had never seen that child before. Before this story begins, take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Ghost Tales Maybe, if you believe that kindness and second chances can change a person's life. Stories like this remind us that sometimes the people we love carry burdens we never imagine. I stood alone in the kitchen as sunlight poured through the windows, turning the dust in the air into tiny golden sparks. The house was quiet, except for the ticking clock on the wall. Maris had gone to the market that morning, leaving me to clean the garage and organize the old shelves. I had expected an ordinary Saturday. Instead, I found a secret that had been hidden for 2 decades. The photograph felt heavy in my hands. The little girl looked about 5 years old and had the same bright eyes as my wife. My heart pounded so hard that I could hear it. I searched through the other pictures. There were more photographs of the same child. A birthday cake, a swing in a park, a Christmas tree. Then there was another picture of Maris, holding the little girl in her arms while crying. I sat at the kitchen table and waited. When Maris finally came home, she carried a bag of fresh bread and flowers. She smiled when she saw me, but her expression changed immediately when she noticed the photograph spread across the table. The color drained from her face. For 20 years I had known every smile, every habit, and every fear of this woman. But in that moment she looked like a stranger. She slowly sat across from me. I didn't ask any questions right away. I simply pushed the photograph toward her. A single tear rolled down her cheek. For a long time neither of us spoke. Then she whispered that she had prayed I would never find that box. Her hands trembled as she explained that before she met me, she had been a young single mother. She had fallen in love with a man who promised to marry her and raise their child together. Instead, he disappeared the day their daughter was born. At only 20 years old, she had no money, no family support, and nowhere to go. For 5 years, she raised her daughter alone. Then tragedy struck. She became seriously ill and lost her job at the same time. Bills piled up. They were evicted from their apartment. Some nights they slept in their old car. One winter evening, desperate and afraid, she made the hardest decision of her life. She placed her daughter with a loving couple she knew from church. The family had tried for years to have children and promised to raise the little girl with love and security. Maris believed she had no other choice. A few months later, she recovered, found steady work, and tried to rebuild her life. But by then, the adoptive family had moved to another state. She never saw her daughter again. I listened in silence. The room seemed to shrink around us. Then she said something that shattered my heart. She had wanted to tell me many times during our marriage, but shame stopped her. She feared I would see her as a terrible mother. She feared I would leave. And then she admitted something else. Every year on her daughter's birthday, she drove alone to the old church where the adoption papers had been signed. She sat in her car and prayed for the child she had lost. 20 birthdays, 20 years of silent grief. I looked at my wife and suddenly I saw every moment differently. Every birthday when she became unusually quiet. Every December when she seemed sad for no reason. Every time she stared at children in the park. She had been carrying this sorrow all along. I should have been angry. Instead, I felt something break inside me. I saw not a liar, but a frightened young woman who had spent 20 years punishing herself. That night, neither of us slept. The next morning, I found Maris sitting on the porch watching the sunrise. For the first time in our marriage, she looked exhausted beyond words. I sat beside her. She expected me to leave. Instead, I held her hand. People make impossible choices when life corners them. Some decisions become scars that never heal. I told her she didn't have to carry the secret alone anymore. She cried harder than I had ever seen. Then I asked the question that changed everything again. Did she want to find her daughter? She looked at me as if I had offered her the world. For years, she had convinced herself she had no right to search. But deep inside, she had never stopped hoping. And so our journey began. We spent weeks contacting old churches, searching public records and calling people who might remember the adoptive family. There were many dead ends. Several times Maris nearly gave up. Each failure seemed to reopen an old wound, but I couldn't let her stop. I had spent 20 years loving this woman. If there was a chance to heal her heart, I would keep going. One afternoon, an elderly pastor called us back. He remembered the adoption. He remembered the family. And he still had an old address. It wasn't much, but it was enough. We drove 3 hours to a small town surrounded by green hills and fields of wildflowers. The address led us to a modest white house. Maris couldn't even get out of the car. Her hands shook so badly that she dropped her purse. I knocked on the door. An older woman answered. The moment she saw Maris standing behind me, tears filled her eyes. She recognized her immediately. She invited us inside. Over tea and trembling voices, she explained that the girl had grown into a wonderful young woman named Ilara. She had become a teacher and now lived in the neighboring town. Then the woman said something none of us expected. Ilara knew she had been adopted, and every year she asked questions about her birth mother. Maris covered her face and began to cry. After all these years, her daughter had never forgotten her either. The woman gave us an address. The drive there felt endless. When we arrived, we saw a small school at the edge of town. Children were playing outside under the bright afternoon sun. Then I saw her, a young woman with curly brown hair. The same eyes, the same smile. Maris couldn't move. She looked as if time had stopped. I gently took her hand and led her forward. Ilara turned toward us. She smiled politely, assuming we were visitors. Then she noticed the tears in Maris's eyes. Something changed in her expression. Perhaps it was instinct. Perhaps it was something deeper. The world seemed to go silent. Maris whispered her name. The young woman stared at her. Then tears appeared in her own eyes. She had spent her entire life wondering about the woman who gave her away. And now that woman stood before her. They walked toward each other slowly. Then they embraced. 20 years of pain disappeared in one moment. I stood a few feet away, unable to hold back my tears. There are moments in life so beautiful that they make you believe in miracles. That was one of them. Over the next few hours, stories were shared and questions were answered. There was sadness, regret, and grief. But there was also understanding. Ilara never hated her mother. She understood sacrifice. She understood desperation. And she understood love. Because giving a child away so they could have a better life is also an act of love. As the sun began to set, the three of us sat together outside the school. Golden light covered the grass. Children's laughter echoed in the distance. For the first time in 20 years, my wife looked peaceful. A burden she had carried for half her life had finally been lifted. Our family looked different than we had imagined. But somehow it felt complete. In the months that followed, Ilara became part of our lives. She visited often. We celebrated birthdays together. We shared holidays. And slowly, 20 years of lost time began to heal. One evening I found Maris standing in the garden. She looked up at the stars and smiled. She told me that secrets don't disappear. They simply grow heavier until someone is brave enough to open the door and let the light in. If this story has touched your heart, please like, share, and leave a comment below. Stories of forgiveness and second chances deserve to be heard because somewhere in the world, someone may need hope today. Special request. Comment, "Love finds a way," if you believe family can heal even after years of separation. As I watched my wife and daughter laughing together on the porch that evening, I realized something important. The secret my wife kept for 20 years did not destroy our marriage. The truth saved it.